In the thick fog along the Kursk border, a Russian convoy was advancing, carrying soldiers, fuel and ammunition. But what seemed like a simple military maneuver was already destined to turn into a massacre. Ukrainian drones were monitoring every meter. Special forces had already taken positions in the area, and within minutes, the trucks would be reduced to smoking wreckage. On that day, 3 Mavic 3 drones from the 14th Regiment acted as the operation's relentless eyes. They flew in a triangular formation with spacing that maximized coverage. If one was detected or shot down, the other 2 would continue the mission. They operated at 300 meters of altitude, leveled to maintain an unobstructed field of view and to stay outside the most common engagement range of some light Russian air defense systems. The primary camera was the thermal sensor module. Thermal images allowed the team to distinguish the convoy from the E-38 road, even with light fog and smoke. Engines, exhausts and fuel tanks appeared as hotspots on a heat map. In real time, the feeds were transmitted to the command post, giving the team continuous intelligence on speed, gaps between vehicles and stopping points. Knowing the contents of the convoy turned the opportunity into a priority for the Ukrainian team. There were 14 trucks organized in a single column, protected by light escort vehicles. The load consisted of 300 soldiers aboard, 650,000 cartridges of ammunition, 7,193 liters of diesel, 1,200 hand grenades, and 200 artillery shells. In practical terms, that cargo was a lifeline for frontline units. It provided ammunition to sustain suppressive fire, diesel for combat vehicles, and artillery for operational support. Cutting that lifeline meant not only deaths and equipment losses, but the paralysis of entire sectors. The choice of terrain was what turned intelligence into a trap. The kill zone was a stretch of the E-38, where the road narrowed between a shallow valley and a belt of sparse trees, creating an open corridor, low relative altitude compared with the surrounding ground, and limited lateral visibility for those inside the column. There, teams from the 225th Special Forces Brigade had already infiltrated at dawn. They took positions in overlapping crossfire formations shaped like the letter L, with concealed firing bases on 2 perpendicular axes that ensured overlapping fields of fire at the points where the column would be forced to slow. Their timing was to wait for the convoy to enter exactly the box where sensors, drones, and shooters converged. The Russian convoy seemed to advance with confidence up to that point. That was because, just minutes earlier, it was still under the protection of the electronic warfare perimeter covering the Sudja region. There, surveillance radar systems and Lear-3 jammers mounted on mobile towers provided a defensive bubble capable of blinding drones and cutting communications. Inside that bubble, the convoy was practically invisible to small-scale air attacks. But once it left that area, it began moving through exposed terrain without the cover of a continuous electronic network. That was the moment when its vulnerability became clear. At 6:13 in the morning, one of the Mavic 3 drones detected strong interference on the frequency. The signal fluctuated with unusual intensity, and real-time analysis identified the source: a Russian Lear-3 electronic warfare system mounted on a Kamaz truck. This type of equipment is designed specifically to hunt drones. It saturates the radio spectrum with noise waves, attempting to break the command link and force the aircraft to crash immediately. For the convoy, it worked like a mobile electronic shield. But the Ukrainian operators had already anticipated this scenario and prepared a layered response. The reconnaissance drone activated frequency hopping spread spectrum, a technique that shifts the signal's frequency thousands of times per second, making it virtually impossible for the jammer to keep up. Meanwhile, the FPV drones approaching the attack zone disabled GPS reliance and switched to inertial navigation, based on high-precision gyroscopes and accelerometers, technology that does not depend on satellites and cannot be spoofed. Finally, the operators shifted part of the command signal to the L-band, which is far less vulnerable to Russian interference. In a matter of seconds, the attempt to suffocate the drones backfired against the Russians themselves. The Lear-3 was burning energy on waves that no longer had any effect, while the Ukrainian drone fleet adapted and pressed forward toward the attack. The convoy kept advancing, unaware that its electronic defenses were failing against smart and low-cost countermeasures. The clock struck 6:17 when the ambush shifted from the waiting phase to the action phase. The Russian convoy had just entered the range of Ukrainian HIMARS, 72 kilometers away. But the true trigger did not come from artillery. It came from the kill zone on the E-38. At just 1.8 kilometers from the exact ambush site, the message came over the radio in a dry tone: fire. The first strike landed less than a minute later. At 6:18 and 7 seconds, an FPV drone dove at high speed toward the Ural truck leading the column. The onboard artificial intelligence automatically recognized the engine air intake as the most vulnerable spot and corrected its trajectory in the last 3 seconds. The hit was precise. The drone punched through the front block, detonating the engine and turning the vehicle into a burning barricade. The Russian column, compressed on the narrow road, was now trapped by what was supposed to guide it. Exactly 14 seconds later, the second drone struck the logistical heart of the operation, a Kamaz tanker loaded with 7,193 liters of diesel. The warhead punched through the side of the tank, and the explosion was devastating. A jet of burning fuel spread across the asphalt, engulfing 3 nearby vehicles. The fireball rose nearly 30 meters, lighting up the highway and announcing that the trap had been sprung. Soldiers tried to hurl themselves out of the trucks, some in panic, others attempting to form improvised defensive lines. But the 225th Special Forces Brigade was already prepared for this moment. From hidden flank positions, RPG-27s were fired at vehicles still moving, blasting fiery craters and preventing any chance of retreat. The shooters moved in pairs, alternating fire and reloads to keep up constant pressure. Meanwhile, RGO grenades were hurled at clusters of soldiers trying to regroup along the roadside. The fragmented blasts swept the shoulder clean, forcing the Russians to stay down, unable to mount an effective defense. Every attempt to push into the tree line, every effort to break the encirclement, was cut down with short bursts of automatic rifles and fast impact explosives. A fuel truck burned like a beacon, immobilized vehicles blocked every withdrawal, and the trapped troops were caught in crossfire. All of it in under 2 minutes. Drones, anti-tank weapons, and grenades were being used in perfect synchronization. In less than 3 minutes, what had been a vital supply column turned into nothing more than a succession of craters and flames. Out of the 14 trucks, 11 were completely destroyed in direct or secondary explosions, and 3 were left incapacitated, abandoned on the road with engines torn out or tires burned away. Drone cameras broadcast in real time the trail of disaster: burning vehicles, scattered wreckage, and a highway covered in black smoke visible for kilometers. Thermal images revealed the most brutal picture: more than 300 Russian soldiers killed or incapacitated in a matter of minutes. Some were trapped inside burning vehicles, others caught on the roadside, pinned down by special forces. There was no time for an organized reaction. On the Ukrainian side, the operation was swift and decisive. Not a single casualty was reported. The coordination between drones, RPGs, and grenades turned what should have been a simple logistical convoy into a flawless ambush. The E-38 highway remained blocked for more than 48 hours, transformed into a graveyard of steel and burned fuel. This forced the Russians to reroute supply lines, interrupting logistics for the fronts in Pokrovsk and Kharkiv. For 2 full days, frontline units went without the planned resupply of ammunition and fuel, cutting into their offensive capability. That pause, achieved in mere minutes, gave the Ukrainian lines breathing space and forced the Russian General Staff to redistribute resources and revise schedules. The Kursk ambush proved once again that war is not decided solely by tanks or troop numbers, but by the ability to turn intelligence into lethal and precise action. The Ukrainian mission was far more than the destruction of a convoy. It became a portrait of modern warfare in 3 layers, where every piece functioned as part of a single mechanism, synchronized within seconds to achieve maximum effect. This episode reveals the new face of global combat. Today, infantry no longer needs to engage in hand-to-hand duels in trenches to decide a battle. It is the final link in a closed-loop kill chain, where sensors, drones, and artillery work together to deliver targets ready for execution. War, once decided by mass and volume, now depends on technology, precision, and coordination. What we witnessed in Kursk is a clear warning. Small teams, armed with intelligence and low-cost equipment, can paralyze much larger forces in minutes. This is the battlefield of the 21st century. Fast, lethal, and unpredictable. And the entire world is watching. If you thought it was impressive how drones and special forces can turn the tide in just minutes, wait until you see what the United States has just done in the Pacific. A single nuclear submarine managed to humiliate the Chinese Navy right in the middle of a test of its most modern aircraft carrier. exposing vulnerabilities that are also raising concerns in Russia and North Korea. Click now on the video appearing on your screen and discover how this demonstration shifted the balance of power in the new Cold War.